Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, the place where your spirit goes when something tells you it might be time to change direction. Hey everybody, welcome back to Thursday on the Crossroad Diner. Steve McCurdy here, your host. With me is Brandon Hargraves. Brandon is a fascinating guy. His background, not unlike mine, is there's a lot of church in it, and there's a lot of faith-based stuff. So we've been talking about the diner, and he really gets the whole idea of faith and hope and grace, and Lucy talking to you when you're trying to make decisions. Welcome to the diner, Brandon.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love the idea of just what you're doing here. It's
That's good.
incredible.
So we were expanding and talking a little bit. You know, one of the reasons you end up in the diner, it's always some sort of dissatisfaction or an epiphany where you are going, this is not me, or this doesn't work, or something along the line that something got to change,
Yeah,
or at least it's got to get examined. Now, you told me that you had lived most of your life with issues around depression, and but that you got to a point, and your wife held up a mirror to you, and that prompted some change. Can you just tell us that story a little bit there?
yeah, absolutely. So, like you even said, I grew up kind of in that depression, but I didn't even realize it. I just thought life is hard. We hear all the time, life's tough, but you got to tough through it. So I just thought, man, this is just the way life is. I just need to
Yeah.
try harder to be happy, to be a good person. And it was about 2 years into marriage. My wife looks at me and she's like, you're struggling, and it's evident. Like, I'm not the only one that notices it. I'm the only, she might have been the only one that was able to say something, but she wasn't the only one that noticed it. So she just pointed that out. I was like, you're struggling, and it might be time for you to reach out, to find some other way, because what you're doing right now isn't working. Find some other way to get help.
Did you find that true? Did that ring? Did that resonate as authentic?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was because what I was doing was I was just trying harder, and trying
Mm.
harder just made me more tired. Like I was doing everything in my strength to be happy or to find joy, but my strength wasn't enough. And I had been trying, that was at that point, trying for 20, 21 years to be happy or to find this joy within myself. And it wasn't something that I could do on my own.
But you received it in love, and you knew it to be true. It did not hurt the relationship. It was truth and reaching out, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in the moment, it didn't feel good to hear.
Yeah.
Like, it never does, but you have to be able to kind of, especially from someone that you know loves you more than anything,
Right.
just take it as like, this isn't meant to be something that hurts you. This is meant to be something that shows you a way to be better. And that was her goal. And I could totally feel that from her. In that, like I said, in that moment, it was hard to hear. Even for the next week, it was hard to handle. But going away from it, knowing this might be where I'm at now, but this is not the forever reality.
Right.
And knowing that I have someone that can help me get to a better
Well,
place.
so what'd you do? I mean, that the problem's identified. You need to do something. How did something manifest? What was that?
I started just looking around to different places. I started researching online, just looking up like, how do people handle this? And there's all sorts of different resources out there. And just kind of not just find one and just go to one, but start
Yeah.
talking to people and figure out what worked for them, maybe what didn't work for them, what worked for this person, what worked for that person. Ended up finding out that like there is a lot of like actual depression and stuff like that that is actually like a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Mhm.
Um, which I had grown up my whole life, obviously in church. And there was a lot of the fact is like, if you're dealing with depression, it means you're not praying hard enough. And while I do believe that there is a God that can heal in a moment, sometimes God will heal through medicine. So it was trying to go through some of those different um, people and conversations to try to figure out what is going to be my next step. And it actually took probably a month and a half to figure out I need to actually see someone that has studied a little bit to
Right.
try and figure out what is my personal next step.
You bring up a really good point about the church means well all the time,
Yeah,
and but there are interpretations of messages that can get fences built around them. And Christ was not somebody who built fences. He kind of opened things up a lot.
yeah.
And I firmly believe, listening to your story, that God's way of reaching to you was to go through the voice of the person you love the most and say, you know, when I talk to you, God, I'm being God for a moment here. When I'm talking to you, Brandon, you're hearing pressure. So I'm going to talk to you with my love through her love for you and let you hear that the love first and then the look. And then when you go on that path, then I will light that path and I will put before you that which you are looking for. I said to you, ask and it shall be opened. This is what I got to get you asking. And
Yeah.
and as far as the diner is concerned, this is exactly the same thing. Now, if you and I, this is I'm arguing with myself about this question. Um, I'd like to think that there's somebody listening to this show now, a year from now, 2 years from now, in its archive, who is where you were and is hearing. It's okay to go ask. It's okay to go look. What would your counsel be to those folks? You started getting a lot of. How did you organize the information that you were getting?
Um, it was actually a little bit difficult. Started writing down in a journal um,
Ah,
my thoughts
yeah,
about conversations that I was having. Like, for instance, I would talk to my pastor and say, "This is what I'm going through right now," and he would say something. So I would go home that night and I would write my thoughts in that journal. And through that, it was more than just processing because I know it probably just me, but my mind can get a little messy sometimes. So I put it on paper. So I can come back and read is like, oh, that's how I felt coming out of that conversation about this topic. So I did that with all the different things, and eventually just ended up I needed to take a step. More than just like I could compile all the information as much as I wanted, but eventually I needed to take that step of moving into like an actual going to see a professional. It
right,
ended up being what I did. Like I went to see a doctor that said, yes, I don't actually, he didn't actually think this was just like a situation that caused it. He thought that there was actually like that clinical something in the brain wasn't firing exactly right. So he actually gave me something that like it might not be for everyone, but it worked for me. Obviously people need to be very aware
right.
when it comes to medication and medicating on these things, but it worked for me, and I can say I felt normal after that, rather than feeling like everything was dark, or and also not too far the other way. It was like I can't control how happy and giddy. Like it was actually like it leveled me out.
Right.
So being able to find that was definitely a blessing. But like I said, it took me actually taking that step. You can research all you want, but sometimes you need to take that step of faith, like Peter did, out of the boat into the water. Even though you might not know what it looks like, it might
Right.
not seem very possible, but you have to take that step in order to see the
Well, you're
miracles.
talking about what you're talking about is a leap of faith, and it's the not knowing and acting anyway that is where the answers are. Because I got a buddy that says God can't steer a parked car. That you got to kind of get in motion, and then you go, oh, this is the wrong way, and you change, and you've got to let grace wash over you and go. A lot of this is going to be wrong, but it's going to show me what's right. And so you would a medicate a route of medication. Did it take a long time to figure out which medication, or did you hit it right out of the park first time?
It took a long time to figure out how much, like the actual dosage, because the doctors that I was seeing it started off with the very smallest, and like you could tell I was like, oh, that's kind of working, but I'm still like more often than not feeling great. So like, okay, up it just a little bit, and that second time ended up being what I needed. Um, but they there's a bunch of different kinds out there. I was lucky enough to say the first one that I tried ended up actually making me feel good. I have a friend who's struggling with some very similar things, and he said that first one that he tried, he did it like not mentally, but it made him like just physically not feel well.
Right.
So they had to put that one off to the side and was like, okay, let's try a different route. And I think that's completely fine as long as the steps are being taken. And you
I
have
have,
to know yourself.
yeah, I grew up being a really obstinate jerk about medication. And the same kind of thing that you were talking about, that I'm going to pray this away or I'm going to, willpower it out of here because, I'm super. And so one time I hit a wall and the first thing they gave me was a thing that was supposed to be kind of a tranquilizer, and it turned me into an axe murderer. I mean, I wanted to just take everybody out. And so you're right. Everybody's got an individual chemistry, and there's not a book that gives you the right answer. Uh, because first you got to find out who you are, where you are, how your brain works, what the chemical structure actually is. And so sometimes it can be a search, but you got to hang in there because if it can be found, it will be found.
Mhm.
And but what has evolved since then is that you have taken your story. You've found you were talking about you felt more normal. A fish doesn't even know that there's water. It water's just it only knows there's water when it gets out of water. So how did normal feel to you? How did you know that you were in a good place?
I was honestly, it was through my wife again.
Oh,
It was her saying, I noticed a difference, and me
uh,
going, oh, yeah, I feel a difference too. Like, I'm not snapping at people nearly as much as I was because when someone would slight me in any way, I would snap right back at them.
yeah,
And that's just because I wasn't in a healthy place. It wasn't even because what they did deserved um, a reaction. It
right,
was like, I was just like the smallest thing would just get me. So starting to notice after she pointed it out, things are different. Like you're acting differently, and it's a good thing.
yeah.
It seems like you're more you rather than this other thing that is not very healthy. It wasn't very attractive for like you're
Or
starting to see
pleasant.
the
You
man
were
of
just not,
God.
yeah,
Um, that is that image of we believe is Jesus is the image of Jesus that we believe we're supposed to be. So
so you found something that gave you some help, and I take it that you've maintained that for a period.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it, we
and
maintained
then
it.
you decide. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the feedback here. Say it again.
Sorry, maintained it for now for a couple of years.
Okay, but in the midst of all that, you also decided to do something proactive that might help others. Talk to me some about that.
Yeah, so it was actually at the start of the pandemic.
Hmm.
I decided that I wanted to help people kind of find that same healing that I've been able to find. And growing up in church, you probably know this, like they don't often write the same kind of books that the world is used to. So I
Right,
grew up with the self-help books. It was the book written by the pastor or by pastors or leaders that was essentially just one giant message or sermon or self-help seminar in 200 pages. And you
God
could read
loves you. Pray about it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Here's 10 things that you can do, 10 keys to help your life. And then you write them down and then no one ever does them anyway. Like, but they were like, I don't have anything against those books, but I knew
Oh
in my
no.
heart they only reached a certain amount of people.
Right.
And I knew in my heart there were people out there struggling with the same things I did that didn't have access to the teachings, the books that I did because they were into a different kind of thing. Their
Right.
taste was different than mine. So I just took something that I really like. I love fantasy. I grew up with Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, like Aragon, all of those kinds of fun things. And I decided I'm going to write this kind of a book, but I'm going to kind of lace it with these keys that can help the people that are struggling. So the people that don't read the other books can read my book and still get those same ideas, that those same um, kind of nudges in the right direction in order to give them really practical tips of how to really help themselves find that next step.
Well, you don't have a company for 50 years like me called Story Master Media without having a big belief in story. So yeah, uh, I think that the idea of layering um, the reality of depression and um, lack of hope, lack of vision into a story is very approachable and it's very exciting. Tell me the name of the story.
Um, the series is called The White Council. It's got two books right now. The first one's Reflection. The second one's called Insurrection. That one just came out last month.
Okay, and Amazon and everywhere, I would imagine.
Yep, everywhere else you can buy it wherever really they sell books.
Okay, so who? Tell me a little bit about the story. Who's gonna? Is it all going to be kids that grew up with Dungeons and Dragons, or would old fart like me really get a good kick out of it?
I tried to make it as accessible as possible. I know there's a lot of people that do love the fantasy genre that they'll read the big names like J.R.R. Tolkien or whoever, and that again that reaches that certain amount of people. But I tried to make it like if this was your first fantasy book ever, you'd still enjoy it because it's not necessarily focused in on the magic or the all of that. It's
Mm.
focused in on the people and the struggles that they're dealing with, which I feel like whether you like fantasy, sci-fi, or mystery novels, if you can relate to the person, this is the book for you.
Right.
Um, so I feel like it's really anyone can read it. It's an easy read. My wife doesn't read fantasy much, and it took her about half a month to read through it, at least the first one. So I would say yeah. I think anyone could really pick it up.
I was introduced to C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia when I was in the Air Force. I was a nuclear weapon launch officer. I sat underground in a launch control center, and on night alerts, you get there about 8 or 9 at night, and then you're there until the middle of the next morning, and then they're off, and then you come back down. So at night alert, we turn off all the lights so that our circadian rhythms don't get messed up. And I'm sitting there reading Chronicles of Narnia. And if you'll remember the third book, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, they come upon the island of darkness, and it's where all your dreams come true, including the horrible ones. And I'm sitting there with controls for 10 nuclear weapons in front of me in a dark room, getting the water scared out of me by C.S. Lewis. And this little mouse, Reepicheep, is out there going, "We're going to solve this problem." Anyway, I say that to say your vehicle has got a lot of good company for really serious ideas in a very, as you say, accessible package. And you get to it through characters you come to care about and grieve for and grieve with. And you are outside that book. You can't help them. So, and that is so incredibly real. And then you start rooting for the people that are giving them the message and they're not getting it. So I thoroughly applaud your approach. And so there's two books now. When's the third one coming?
I'm planning on releasing one every single year. So this last one came out actually the beginning of this month on the 10th.
Okay.
So the goal is to have the next one released by January next year.
Okay. Do you have contact with your readers? Are you accessible personally, or is that a thing that you keep some distance from?
Yeah. I don't really. I've got a website. I've got social media. If someone wants to contact me, I will respond. Um, haven't had too much experience with that yet, but
But you
hoping.
look very, you're on here and you're doing a very capable job here. I'm sure. that you're one on one, and particularly, writers in this genre. It's like, in my era, it was Trekkies. If you get around people that are talking about Trek, you can just close out the rest of the universe and sign off for a week and a half. So, what can we offer folks in the way of a way to look at their situation they can get the books, they can read the books, and where in our what do we call it, notes, we can put your social media contacts. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm Brandon.Hargraves on both Instagram and Facebook. That's really
Okay.
the primary ones that I'm on. There's other ones out there. I don't have a lot of like that time to be able to really put out to all of them, but because I can post to the same things at the same time for social media and for Instagram and Facebook, those are the ones that I use primarily.
Yeah, that's good. That's smart. So, before we got started, I told you I was going to ask you this question. Person finds themselves in the Crossroad Diner and doesn't realize they went there. This is you before your wife talked to you, and something puts them there. What are the questions a person needs to ask themselves when they get into this? I need to change, and I don't know anything about how, because how stops us on almost everything. What counsel would you give them if they find themselves in need of a change and don't know even where to begin?
It all starts with that honesty with yourself, looking in and saying, "Am I okay?"
Hmm.
Um, for that
Is this
long
the
time,
me I want to be? Right.
exactly. And is this healthy? And is my soul healthy? Not am I healthy in a physical, like maybe it is a physical thing, but is my soul healthy right now? And being able to answer that honestly, almost painfully truthfully, um, has to be that first step, because like we said earlier, we can't reach out. Like if you're a fish out of water, but you don't realize you're drowning or you're lacking water,
Right.
you can't really help yourself. If you don't know there is a problem, then it's so difficult to try to change on that crossroad. But as soon as you start to realize, get in front of that mirror and see, okay, I'm I'm not happy. Being able to really pinpoint what is it that isn't okay right now. And if you can't pinpoint it, ask people around you. Ask the people that you know love you, that care for you, that want the best for you. Because you can ask other people, and that's not exactly healthy sometimes, because sometimes people are just like, oh no, you're fine, or like, this is exactly how I want you to be, but that's not a healthy view.
Yeah.
But ask the people that want the best for you, and they'll help you pinpoint that. But it all starts with that, being honest and pinpointing what is it that is making me not.
You bring up a really interesting point there. You don't ask for answers; you ask for information. Depending on, because if you ask the same question of your wife and your buddy and the guy that you met last week, and you listen for what's behind the response, not necessarily the response itself, and you'll start getting really classes of information. Some of it's going to be about the person you asked and where they're coming from. That's fine, but also you will start to get that insight if you ask. There's a couple of philosophies that I have subscribed to. We had a math teacher in my high school who was the most encouraging human being, and he taught hard math, advanced math. And he would say, "Look, you've been given a good mind, and you've done some things to improve and work on that mind, but you don't have all the answers, and you're never going to have them. And if you think you are, that's where the big problem is." But the answer to any question you need is right around you all the time. You just have to ask a better question. And the way that you ask better questions is start wherever you are and try to do better. And I think you've given us a great example of that. Say hi to your wife for all of us in the Crossroad Diner and thank you to her for loving you enough to tell you the truth and trusting you enough to start. Because love is not doing for. Love is accepting the person exactly as they are and holding up a mirror and saying, you are not the man I know right now. And I don't know why that is. And I'll help you any way I can, but I don't know what that is. You're going to have to be the key to this. Very, very good stuff. Brandon Hargraves, thanks for being on the Crossroad Diner today, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and just letting me share an amazing thing you're
Okay.
doing.
Well, we will be looking forward to your book. And next Monday, folks, is John and I again walking through the steps of asking yourself the question, who am I now? Who do I want to be? And what's the path? Until next time, Steve McCurdy with the Crossroad Diner and our buddy Brandon Hargraves. We'll see you on the next time.
Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, the place where your spirit goes when something tells you it might be time to change direction.